Welcome to Startup Hacks, a We Global Studios podcast. We explore the stories and secret strategies that women entrepreneurs use to save time and money when bootstrapping and building their businesses. I'm your host, Fernanda Carapina, and today I'm so excited to introduce Jennifer Mercer. Jennifer is a serial entrepreneur and the current CEO of Metazoa, a B2B software development company where she applies her extensive experience in enterprise SaaS products. Prior to founding Metazoa, Jennifer co-founded and exited Dream Factory Software, where she launched half a dozen Salesforce AppExchange products and built a RESTful API platform for mobile application developers. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
It is such a pleasure. You have had an incredible ride, and I'm so excited to kind of share your story with our listeners because it's so inspiring. But first, take us back to, Jennifer, the early days, and tell us a little bit about yourself growing up and how you got started in the business.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from Tennessee. I graduated from University of Tennessee, actually in anthropology. So not your typical, not your typical path to Silicon Valley, high-tech entrepreneurship. And I'm not using that degree clearly, but that's okay. Well-rounded education. And I moved to London after college. I wasn't ready to go to grad school, and I obviously never did go to grad school for archaeology or any of those fun things. My first job was actually with a company that was acquired by WebMD, and my husband at that time as well, and he had a software company. So we decided to make the move to Silicon Valley, and at that time, I was working remotely for WebMD, and that's not really fun when you're 25 years old, 26 years old. So with another startup called WebEx, which obviously since went public and was acquired by Cisco. And that was my first foray into really coming out here, being in Silicon Valley, being in high tech. And so it's very odd. I graduated in anthropology, and I've only been in high tech.
So I think that's pretty inspiring to a lot of young entrepreneurs out there. It just goes to show it doesn't really matter, right?
It really doesn't. And, you know, you'll find your way. I think there's a lot of pressure on kids these days to figure out what they want to do and know that going into college and of course, then coming out of college. And we don't always know. Some do, but I did not, clearly.
Well, let's just take a tangential left-hand turn here for a second. And do you have kind of an opinion on what you think early on for college students is kind of a big determinant in terms of being successful in an entrepreneurial life? I mean, do you feel like being, for example, very curious or adventurous? I mean, is there a little bit of a secret sauce that you'd like to throw out there?
Sure. And it's interesting because my daughter is turning 17 this month. And so it's very timely. We're looking at colleges. We're talking about colleges. And my husband, who actually has a master's and PhD from Vanderbilt, just side note, he doesn't think college is even necessary. I don't think he's telling me that. But in private conversations, he really thinks that there's also an option for people just to start in the workforce when they're passionate about something.
Yeah.
And then there's the argument that, you know, you're missing the experience. I definitely think that it is completely fine to be curious. I was in journalism and photography and communications and dabbled in business, all of those in college as majors and minors, and actually have a minor in journalism. I think I don't know. I personally think that is definitely, it's my personality. It's an entrepreneurship, I think, personality where you are not committed to one track and one track only.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you moved to San Francisco, did you immediately start working in the startup area, or did you get a job in kind of corporate America?
I did work in the startup area because my first job was with a company that was acquired by WebMD. So we were a tiny company and then we were acquired. And actually, looking back, I worked for a company in London, which was I work abroad visa for a year, and that company was acquired by Rosenbluth International. It was a corporate travel agency, and I was actually helping them with their due diligence, which at that time was not online files. So you can imagine there's boxes and boxes of contracts in there. But so that was two companies that were acquired. And I think as they started growing, as WebMD started growing, I kind of was looking for a little bit more fast-paced excitement. Started at WebEx in 1998. It was a very small company. I was number 5 sales rep there. They grew very quickly when IPO. It was still pretty fast paced, but when it started corporate America and Cisco, I was ready to move on.
Got it. So when did you launch your first company? How long after that?
It was 2004, really, and I left WebEx. My husband had he had been working with APIs. It was early days APIs when people were just starting to dabble with them. And he had sold his previous company, and we made the decision for me to come on board and help run. He's obviously the engineer, and help run that company, which was Dream Factory. And it was, we were trying to sell the technology, which was a little tough. We were meeting with a lot of VCs, meeting a lot of people that were very helpful in the industry and with regards to getting out there with the technology and selling. But it was still difficult when you're selling a technology and not really an end product, like an app.
Right.
And that's when I think one of the VC firms actually mentioned to us, did you know that Salesforce has released a palette of their APIs? And that was a game changer for us. And that's where the products came in.
So for listeners who might not understand what an API is or why a Salesforce palette of APIs is helpful, do you mind kind of explaining a little bit about both of those?
Yeah, not at all. So typically you were pushing things to a server. That was prior to APIs, and APIs are allowing you to consume from a server. And so it has an interface. So think of something like a weather app where you're updating it and you're getting all of that information locally, or traffic, something like that. It was really early days. By Salesforce opening up their API palette, it allowed us to use their CRM, their customer management relationship software, and make edits to it and customize it and create products on top of it. So now we're selling to Salesforce's customers like IBM, Grand Central, CNET, companies like that have Salesforce throughout their entire organization, and different departments need different customizations. Does that make sense?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you've been working in the Salesforce environment now for a while, it seems, I recollect.
Yes, we did. So we were one of the very first partners. And one thing that was really beneficial at that time is that Salesforce had these APIs, but they didn't have anything to show. So they're out there talking to analysts and investors, and they're talking about it. And as you can see, like, you can describe it, but you really want to see what it is. And we were the first developers to build on it. So it was kind of a win-win where we could show what we have built along with Salesforce, and be there at the very first Dreamforce, which I think had 1,000 people, and now it's up to 180,000 last year.
Wow.
They've certainly grown to take over San Francisco. But we were one of the first partners. We were one of the first on their marketplace, which is called the AppExchange. And as you mentioned, we launched over a dozen apps, one being very popular that we created for ourselves called Snapshot. And it was a release management application, which means as we're developing, we're able to push our code from the sandbox to production and just kind of keep pushing it and developing on top of the platform. There wasn't really anything available. So we created that, and then we thought, well, let's put it on the AppExchange, and it became one of our most popular apps out there.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's brilliant. And it's a great way to fast track a tech business because a lot of the fundamental work is already there. Plus, you already have a whole marketplace at your disposal to sell to if you can find utility that isn't being kind of met by their current offerings.
Absolutely. It's definitely the way to go. And there's a lot of companies like SAP and Intuit and Microsoft that have these ecosystems. Salesforce is a little bit more, I feel like a closed ecosystem because we also did leave the Salesforce ecosystem in 2009. Right after the credit crisis, a lot of companies were pivoting and moving to different technologies. A lot of VCs had to drop their portfolio companies. We were very fortunate with one of our top tier VC firms. We did take funding in 2006, just by the way, and so we had been building the business up until that point. They did not, and by they I mean our investors, did not feel that there was an exit strategy just being a Salesforce partner on the Salesforce ecosystem at that time. So we pitched again and raised additional funds to go and build an API platform for PHP developers, basically what I say for the whole wide world, an open source technology off of the Salesforce platform. So that was almost like a second startup there. That was our second foray into a new business.
And it seems like there's really no stopping you, right, from continuing to iterate once you have great ideas and you see there's a need for a specific type of product or service within the platform.
We did, because at that time everybody was talking about managing APIs. You're building on top of previous APIs, and it's like a tangled mess. Think about it, like spaghetti or something. And we realized that bubble is going to burst at some point. There needs to be some automation there, and it was roll your own APIs rather than continue to add on to them. And it was quite successful, and we went out for M&A in 2017 and eventually sold Dream Factory with a successful exit.
Yeah, congratulations. That's fabulous. How have you found the Silicon Valley environment for you as a female leader? Do you have any thoughts around that?
Absolutely. And it's changed a lot. I mean, over the last 15 years, I think it's changed in various ways. I do feel like the younger generation has a lot more options or opportunities, or maybe a different mindset. I was doing an interview recently, and we were talking about the difficulties of being a young mother, or not a young mother, but being younger than I am now, but being earlier on in my career, I should say, versus now, and really feeling this pressure of deciding, do I work full time? Do I not work full time? And I feel like women, a generation below me, I feel like they have a lot more option to not make that choice, especially now with being able to work remotely and work from home. And but at the time it seemed like a bigger deal. And I remember just even at my daughter's elementary school, there was the working moms and the non-working moms, and there's no right or wrong. Obviously, it's everybody's choice and what they feel comfortable with. But I do remember missing my daughter's like second grade Valentine's Day party and just beating myself up over it. And now she's 17 and does not remember the second grade Valentine's Day party. But if it works for some, that's great too. And I also feel like, as far as the leadership goes, there was I feel like it was really my mindset. I could have spoken up more. I could have implemented my decisions more. And I was able to within the company, but I think sometimes outside of that with investors, I maybe didn't speak up as much as I would now and do now.
And as you were going through this process of starting and building these companies, let's switch gears for a second and talk about some of the strategies that you and your partner, your husband, use to kind of save time, money, gain a competitive edge? Were there some recommendations or special strategies that you used either for